The solution to our problems, from the macro to the micro, are spiritual. The root causes of the problems that we're facing now come from a spiritual sickness, and it's erupting in our world today through the illusions of separation and the violent rhetoric. And we are seeing things now. We are seeing a real lack of empathy, sympathy, understanding. We are seeing a witch hunt from both those that identify with being on the right and those that identify with being on the left, including the moderation of the YouTube monetization. We have a lot of us that are independent that are speaking out against what is taking place and the left-right divide and the fracturing of consciousness. And we see ourselves punished, scorned, misidentified to be someone else's political or racial enemy because we're not in their paradigm. It's not an easy position to be where I am. Having said that, we are going to be examining some other truths from other individuals. Have my headphones ready. We're going to be listening to an interview between Derick Broze and Mark Passio. And I think it's fairly interesting to, to note a few things. First of all, they did a great job. We're going to be focused on the things that they're saying about the AMERICULT. And for those of you that have been watching my channel for some time, first of all, I came across Passio's work years ago, and I hear a lot of things that he talks about that are very similar to my own line of thought, but I don't make a habit of just listening to some of the same men or following them, because I also have my own truths, and I'm very passionate about my own truths. Sometimes I don't even hear some of those things echoed by others. So I've come to appreciate the fact that we have unique perspectives, and at times they overlap. Now, our personalities may be so unique, and the nature of our character can be so independent that we may go through our whole lifetime never really becoming bros with others, right, that are a lot like us. Maybe the world isn't about us becoming a bunch of bros and hanging out and such. And so what I think that the audience forgets quite often is to stay out of groupthink themselves, to stay out of herd behavior themselves. It's not about following the leader. It's about finding the truth within. So the point in bringing light, really sound, in just a moment, to their truth is that it intersects with my truth in the very same warnings that I've shared with you. Now, mind you, Alex Jones is going to come up, and both of those individuals at one point, because they weren't blacklisted, were on InfoWars. And so even they are able to see the light, and we're all truly on the same side of being against what this world order system is all about, and really understanding what's taking place and going beyond the illusions of separation. And I think that we have seen a real shifting of energies in recent years to where we've seen some people go on the dark side, and we've seen some people come closer to the light. The interesting thing about Passio, we're going to skip the introduction, he said that he, and I noticed this, he stopped doing his podcasts when Trump was elected. And I'm going to stay out of criticism in this video, and we have maybe our own views on different things, but I think that this is a case on his part of waiting to see really how bad the situation could possibly be or get before really commenting further. He also had his own personal life challenges regarding living situation and relationships, and so or an ending of a relationship. And I want to stay out of personal matters, but I will say, in observing that, I also see parallels in the life experience between myself and others. And it is often when someone is in a stable relationship and has someone in their corner that they do their very best as a truth speaker. And that's, something that I'm aware of on a deep root level, seeing some people that have been successful and they've maintained their focus on the message and not minute personal issues. It's because during a certain period in their life, they had someone in their corner where someone believed in them and they had that deep connection to someone else or another human being. It doesn't mean that we can't achieve that without that. It means that if you pay attention to some of the more successful individuals and periods in which they're creating a lot of the great work, it's usually because some sort of balance has been struck in their life, and that can come from a relationship, or that can come from a healthy living situation, or feeling like a part of a community, or having family members around. But if you've ever walked without a home, without a significant other, without family, and without family or much more than a few hundred views per video, for example, maybe in your 12th year, when you experience a certain level of hardship, there's a certain level of, on a good level, hardening or a thickening of the skin that takes place that may not have been there before. And so there is a reason why some of us face certain levels of hardship, and I'm just saying this in case Mark is listening, and it is ultimately there to help us become stronger individuals. Sometimes we may experience blowback from this world by not joining the cult. And it could come through in some other weird, bizarre way that we're not expecting, the energetic blowback. And it doesn't have to be a result of negative karma. It could be a result of the great work. And sometimes we just have to keep going and keep moving forward. And so I am going to bring you some things, some food for thought. I want to be very careful with my language concerning the current events that are taking place. And I want to tell you that it is on my mind heavily, the psyops that we're dealing with, and the need to discuss this at outsidethebox.vhx.tv. Click the link below. Please join for $5.95. We actually have our first new Patreon, I think, in maybe a month or two. I want to thank that individual for pledging $5. Help me break the $100 a month level. I really need your support. For those of you that are watching on Patreon, especially at this time, if you can afford it, now that we've reached the end of the month and I've made my land payment as we go into winter and November, there are some things that I need to be aware of, but I am going into this winter with more determination and intended positive energy to bring more consciousness to this situation that we are dealing with. I have had my own battles. I have had my own struggles. I have had my own stress. I have had my own pain. I live at 8,000 feet, and that even comes with a little bit of its own unique challenges, along with living in isolation. To be frank, I miss being around others. And so I'm walking my own walk because of the life path that I chose and the things that I speak of, the great work that I'm seeking to do. So I'm actually going to play for you some audio from that video. This, by the way, is a book on the Nagamati that was written in the 1950s. So I'm trying to go through that in preparation for a future video to give you some fresh information and insight on this ancient spiritual text that was discovered in Egypt in 1945, which is the subject of a lot of interpretation nowadays. And I think that this is a time where certain ancient spiritual understandings need to have a resurgence in order for people to find the true light in this world that is covered by darkness. I'll also say, with regards to the synagogue event, it is a tragic event, and we should not rush to particular judgments based on intense political cult-like mentalities. We're going to be listening to Mark talk about the cult-like mentalities. However, we can see when the nation is up in uproar about particular tweets from the individual that is accused of the event, things that he was posting on Gab, meanwhile giving Gab plenty of promotion, while Gab, the website, is featured on InfoWars. In fact, InfoWars helped promote Gab, and so they're not taking down Gab, they're actually running advertising for Gab, as they talk about Gab being like a free speech alternative to Twitter. But it's also coming out that people get the false notion that people like Alex Jones and the founder of Gab have their back when they go to post their extreme views, and everything's straight up going to law enforcement and the FBI, basically. They're basically in the back end. And so people think that they can go to these other alternatives, dispute the things that they're saying, and it's all basically going into an FBI database. And they're acting like they feel that they have the clear from the inner levels of the government to do certain things, maybe for the time being. Maybe for the time being. Just like there was a certain amount of, oh, come on up to Bundy. Sure. Oh, go on down to the wildlife refuge in Oregon. Oh, it's totally grassroots. Few months, things change. And then we see the people that got the biggest punishments in that case were not the Bundys themselves. But see, because the cult-like thinking and the lack of genuine intuition in the liberty movement, the truth movement, the research movement, also the same movement that dropped the ball on Costia County, kicking people off their land. Can you imagine if AJ or others or any large voices actually got a hold of that story and started discussing some of the root causes and contributing factors to homelessness and things that are actually preventing homelessness solutions? Can you imagine what type of truth movement that would be? But it's not. It's an AMERICULT, where it's problem, reaction, solution. And so with the synagogue, for example, you have a lot of focus on what happened to them. But what about things that are happening to people overseas, as I bring up often? People that are marginalized with this country, within this country, in different neighborhoods, people that are different, people that have different belief systems. It's not raging like it was a year ago or 2 years ago. The feelings are still there. The programming, the damage has been done. David Icke says a person can and hear something once they've heard it. Same thing could be said about people being put under a mind control spell to hate people of a certain group. So the people that are doing the hating are then hated later. So we're actually going to be talking about certain things, but I'm in a state of shock that there isn't the same amount of concern about people that have talked about kill all the muzzies. Okay, I'm against those things. And I'm against and frustrated with the YouTube moderators picking up on our criticism of what extreme behavior is taking place and punishing those of us that have the bravery to talk about it. I've always felt that I risked my life doing this, always, going back to Portland. And there's always a sense of watching my back and always a sense of, well, if I make it beyond 50, I'm doing pretty good. Or if I make it up to a certain point. And that is not an easy way to live. And that is very frustrating to feel like you have to deal with trolls, you have to worry about the mainstream media smearing, and then of course the YouTube moderators and YouTube itself making sure in some cases, so we suspect that we're shadow banned. I wonder sometimes if my concerns about China, if my concerns about other things, the things that I've talked about verbally, have somehow hurt my channel's growth because of the type of commentary. Because I don't understand why the growth is so small compared to people that are brand new on YouTube, that are coming right out, posting videos. But there are some people, including some females that have put out some decent, positive content that look like they're really struggling to build any support at all. And sometimes I don't know why that is. Is it because they're not totally corrupted and evil, like the beauty queens with the beauty channels, or something to that effect? Not a fan of the beauty channel, psychosis. Not a fan of the YouTube gaming channel, psychosis. Not a fan of the psychosis that everything is about the law of attraction. I like the fact that Mark goes a little bit deeper into his perceptions of the mindful way in which it works. And I'm sure he's learned some amazing things in the last few years just simply trying to survive and attract good people into his life that aren't, doing it because they're trying to get close to a celebrity. And there are people that will use us. There are people that will do that without actually being friends and doing the things that we would actually expect from a friend, not a fanatic or a fan, but a friend. And we need to encourage the friendship type mentality, or as Freeman would call it, the friendship agenda. At one point, he created his own little social media site. One made it for him to help him in his travels around the nation. I don't have anything like that, folks. And at times it's a little bit lonely without my own forum to talk to people off YouTube, because the YouTube comment section is fairly controlled. There's a lot of really weird things that are taking place and people that will pop up. And so the community element between us, I'm open to feedback on what would be good mediums to have deeper discussions outside of the comment section, which doesn't really impress me. The way that YouTube has a number of bugs still within the system, and the way that YouTube has contributed to certain types of problems aren't very impressive to me. So we need to think outside the box of YouTube itself, of this system, of this matrix, and look at what's really important. The last things that I'll mention at this time is that certain things that I have suspected, that even people that accuse me of being anti-white when I'm criticizing white supremacy, they're totally ignoring me when I say that white people are being set up. I think they think I'm just making stuff up or making up theories. And yet, even going back 10 years, you can find me warning white America in general that it's being set up for a fall. This was before Trump was on the scene and Obama was still the president, but I never said it was about him. I said they are rallying the people up to be very against the people overseas. And so I identify the biggest religion of the earth to be anti-themism. Anti-themism can use people from different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds to murder the common enemy. And that's essentially what blacks, Asians, whites, and Latinos are doing to the people of the Middle East, including people from the Middle East will help them. Whether it's translation work or whether it's joining the Afghan army or whether it's things of that nature. And I do have some of these beliefs that there really is a system that is organizing a lot of these different groups around the planet to continue to spread a certain level of destruction under the guise of building stability, under the guise of bringing peace and things of that nature. It actually just gets worse. And so I said recently in the Megyn Kelly video regarding blackface that Megyn Kelly more than likely knows what she's doing. That's not supporting Megyn Kelly, that she almost seems to be put up to it to create that type of, because I don't believe a rational person would say the things that Megyn Kelly said. But Americans are so dumb, even that video in which I'm highlighting those things, people think that I'm defending her. Why? Because I segued to a story where I said that that particular video, which I watched, the man didn't show his key pass until the very end. Not the beginning, but the very end. And I realized that if I was to do the same thing, people would treat me a certain way, but the media would not come to my aid. And many of you would not come to my aid or others. But when certain things happen to blacks or whites, people will come to their aid. People will come to their aid very quickly. And there are shades of brown in this world. Okay, so there are some of us that don't identify with being what society expects to see of a black person or white person. Some of us are literally the other. And my whole life I've always been other. And this day and age where you have a white versus black politically charged, where they seem to be like also taking things out on others that aren't white or black, because the tensions between white or black, both white and black, will in unique ways attack other brown or themselves if people don't get behind their ideology in their white versus black. And I'm telling you, I'm noticing deep level programming that I've never seen. I'm almost afraid to talk about it. And I'm not emotional today, but I'm disappointed. The sadness from yesterday is worn off, but I'm disappointed that more of my own audience doesn't understand what I'm bringing to the table. It feels like it's not appreciated, or that it's just rhetoric. This is serious. So I'm going to start this all over again. Okay, bring this to center. There is an agenda to demonize white women and white America in general, in a large scale. Now, for those that are new to my work, I'm actually a person that's been attacked by white nationalists, so my rhetoric isn't white nationalist. I don't identify with white nationalism. I identify with having to watch my back from white nationalists. My father was born overseas. He's Middle Eastern. My mother's white. So, you know, they talk about the white genocide. They've actually described my birth as that, or my birth seems to fit in with what they're concerned with, humans like me being born. So I've been traumatized by that type of a meme. And I don't want to bring it up every video. But those people that find my work that think that I'm citing or defending them, no, that's not true. Those people have actually attacked me and attacked the fact that I'm not behind the demonization of all immigrants and Syrians. There aren't any people on the left to back me up and go, yeah, that Alex Ansari's not a bad guy. He's not a right-wing extremist. They don't back me up because I don't get behind some of their main talking points. And a lot of my content is considered crazy. So why do I say that? Why do I bring that up? I'm bringing that up for the people that are thinking that I'm trying to cover for what they're doing. I'm not trying to cover for what they're doing. I'm explaining that a lot of people are being set up for a fall. Now, whether someone has the evil naturally within them or whatnot, these are deeper philosophical nature questions. And I think that all human beings are living in a fallen world. And so we all have the potential to be evil, all ethnicities. So I don't target a specific ethnicity, but I believe that the powers that be are beyond human. And that they have created a spell to get a certain amount of the population to do the worst things possible during this day and age. And I've said that I believe that it may exceed Nazi Germany, what they've done to the Afghans, what they've done. And some people are trying to argue that Nazi Germany didn't even happen, which is not my argument. But even within their own paradigm of what they're saying, then yes, what is happening now in Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, and other countries, and what could be happening to even people within the United States with strange sounding last names and interesting places where they've come from. I believe that some dark days are ahead that will exceed what happened then. Okay, that's what I see coming. And that what's going to be rolled out on the population, they're going to be using a lot of the negative things that have happened against Americans in general. And so if you go to Google or YouTube specifically, type in white woman or white women. And mostly news or things regarding as if they're born racist, all of them. It's all there. Just take a look at what's there. What I'm seeing is what my intuition is showing me. And I don't believe that my current male or female audience recognizes, very few of you, if anything, that I'm tapping into something. Everything seems to be an argument at this time. There doesn't seem to be like, wow, Alex is narrating something that's happening as it's happening. The other day I talked about V for Vendetta and the idea of predictive programming within the movie, and then events were moving in different directions days later. Folks, I have like no friends in the real sense. I have a few people that watch my channel, but it's like I'm not talking to people. I'm not getting emails, special tips. There's a few that support the channel. That's friendly. So, you know, it's kind of friendly in that sense. But what I'm saying is I'm not juiced in. I don't have like friends in the alternative media that send me information or send me tips. I do not get even hardly any thank you, Jared, for your donations and your philosophy tips. But other than him, there's only one guy that sends anything at all. I don't really interact with people that are trying to, you know, be like, people have tried to tempt me into bad situations and smeared me online for not like helping them build their cult or something. Really freaky people have come around me or tried to connect in the last few years. Normal women, normal men, they for the most part stay away. You need more than the law of attraction, folks, to change that. You need like greater heartfelt consciousness on the part of those humans. That's not necessary for me to do magi or law of attraction for other people to open up their heart and see the value in this type of commentary and content. And again, we're at the end of the month. So if you are able to contribute via PayPal or via some other method, that includes Western Union, which doesn't need the internet, let me know. Because I want to go deeper into this, but I feel that the world is orchestrated to punish me even further for my intuitive epiphanies. So my intuitive epiphany, first of all, there is no superior race, but there could be propaganda that can dupe people into thinking that there is, or that there are lower groups. And this pattern can go on for 10 years, 15 years. It could be like connected to a civilization. And the archonic forces that are beyond human can literally dupe particular civilizations to go in certain ways so they're demonized later. And I said this also recently about the people of the Middle East. Many of them may have been duped by certain forces to follow certain particular religions, only to see those same archonic forces punish them for what they did many hundreds or thousands of years later. It's like literally the torture of a whole human society or civilization is what's taking place. We're being punished. We're being tortured. We're being led into these strange directions. And it's very, very unfortunate. And so the long-term plan is a plan of human trafficking. And so I've talked about the space programs, but even during wartime. So Chris Green may know about this. Chris Green I've never met, but he's never thought much of my work. And I sent him my interview with Leon Legant, where I interviewed a guy in 2007 that has shared his dream, his vision, his nightmare of the occupation of America. And I sent that to Green not once, but twice. And he did not respond to that. And this was a time in which I was suspecting that there could be other strings behind him. And I'm just going to stop my speculation there, but it goes pretty deep. It goes pretty deep as to how they've been able to keep such a control over criticism of Russia within the alternative media, and how long this has been going on, and how some people have seemingly risen to the top within the YouTube arena over all these years. So this is not a situation that I think is accidental. And that when you actually try to look up world affairs, geopolitics, you keep finding the same people on the algorithm popping up to the top while other things are overshadowed. Why is that? And so what I think ultimately we're dealing with is a situation where we could be facing an occupation within this country, but yet the elephant in the room is the trafficking of women, and long term, It's the idea, because a lot of people believe that maybe the U.S. government is in full control of the whole world system. I think that they've been misled anyways with what controls the NWO. And if someone could actually find a way to look at the idea of the NWO as not necessarily pro-American or American-centered, even if they center the power through America, you know, the all-seeing eye, oh, Alex is looking through his hands, magi, magi, it's to give you an idea, the all-seeing eye, the top of the pyramid. Not that all symbolism regarding the eye deals with the Illuminati, or that all Illuminati is dealing with the modern-day New World Order. There is a lot of distortion that I think that we were spoon-fed from day one about all of these symbols to begin with. There's also people out there that are on a witch hunt to marginalize anything spiritual as that of the world order. Oh, that's world order religion. That person wants to see peace and unity between people and not killing each other. It must be a new world order plot. So there's been a lot of perverse alternative media messaging that's been going on. And so even as we hear Chris Green show his concern, let's just go ahead and find that. He diverts to saying the following, that and I don't have the time code lined up like I do with the Mark Passio interview, but he's basically saying that the differences between the left and the right are reconcilable. They can't be, people can't come together. People are just going to keep fighting, and it's just going to keep going to the next level. And he doesn't, as a white male, say that there is a plan in the future for white women to be disappeared. And these are the people, as they talk with their symbols, they're more interested, most of them, in talking about Islam and talking about immigrants and doing this over and over, as opposed to saying, what if there is an agenda to kidnap our female half as a result of what we have done with the very technologies, drones, and otherwise that we are celebrating. And for allies of the current U.S. government, Saudi Arabia, to maybe have their part in this, and maybe for China to have their part in this, and I believe that they will. I'm personally concerned about being targeted by the actual nefarious forces later that will be carrying out these actions. And behind the scenes, the greatest concerns that I've had have been standing invading armies, pouring in and taking out targets, not so much our own government. There is a concern that there will be an advanced cyber war attack on truthers one by one in the future. Possibly there may be a need to relocate. But I'm going to be talking more on VHX about what I just told you, timelines, the 2020s, even trying to tackle the idea of what safe areas could there be for couples and families and single people that are finding my content on the West Coast to direct them away from as well. Stay away from this town. If you're leaving this way, don't try to go this path. If you're on foot and you have a pack and you're forced out of your car, this is probably one of the better directions to head towards. But we can't discount the reality of martial law. We're about to get to that in a minute. We cannot discount the possibility of roads being shut down. So I do not have the master plan. I do not have connections with Joel Skousen. He never returned an email after 2013. He got deeper with Alex Jones, as you know, after that. And because he's a member of the Council on National Policy, which I knew nothing about years ago, he's in with Trump, despite him basically laying out what I'm laying out with you now. He sat next to me, and he has never spoken to me since. Was I so wrong about all these things? Or is there something else regarding Joel Skousen and this right-leaning, supposed Christian-leading group that he's a part of, and this allegiance to what is taking place? How is it Christian, though? I'm not against Christian organizations. How is this CMP actually Christian? Well, it's evangelical, and it seems to have another agenda, and a lot of people think that stuff just ended with Bush, but a lot of those things are riding coattail behind the scenes as this agenda is carried out. So going to the video by Chris Green, we're going to listen to a little bit and then listen to, so it's going to be a longer video, and then we'll listen to Mark Passio. Okay, so at the moment, we are having an issue there. So we're going to go and hear this discussion between these two gentlemen, Mark Passio and Derick Broze, probably 1 hour into my video. We're going up to the 7-minute timeline.
I caught wind. This is just in the last 2 weeks. I did a video about it for those who want to see that on our channel, kind of reflecting on it. You know, this is not an attack on Alex Jones, for those who are big Alex Jones fans. Listen to the words he's saying. He is saying, Obama put this law into place, Trump's going to use it, but for good purposes. And then he'll arrest everybody and we'll have mass tribunals. And then even said, we know Americans will have a gut response to martial law, but this is a temporary thing that needs to happen to get rid of the bad guys. I mean, it's insane. And, and obviously this guy's got millions of listeners who eat up his every word. And so it really does sometimes frighten me to accept the reality that there is a push towards civil war. I don't necessarily think the country's as divided as they would like us to believe, but it's those dialectics of getting the extreme from each side to oppose each other and to keep people in a state of imbalance. You know? So, and this is all coming, of course, on their precious election, right? One of the reasons many of us believe that they're purging these pages is because we're 3 weeks from the election. Many of us would be spending the next couple weeks telling people how voting is a waste of time, how the system is full of it, how these people are corrupt, and now none of those stories will be seen by those millions of people.
No alternative narrative.
Absolutely.
They want their own narrative to be the only narrative that is out there for public consumption. And that's a dangerous proposition, you know, especially, again, because most people's minds still are very softened to accept propaganda. They haven't steeled their own mindset against things like this. They don't understand the tactics that are involved and used as far as psyops go. And the psyops, like you said, they're working beautifully. You know, we have the QAnon psyop. You know, we have, you know, flat Earth versus globe Earth psyop going on. You know, okay, and we have the polarization going on within that community. You know, we have people who believe, you know, if we just vote the right people in there, you know, everything's going to be okay, or we're going to have this, you know, hero show up politically that's going to save the day. That's a big, you know, psyop in, you know, the whole political movement. You know, I think to a certain extent, people banking on the fact that cryptocurrency is going to be the savior of the day could be almost a form of a psyop. I mean, yeah, it's great to have an alternative currency in place so you don't have to that as any kind of savior.
People, and maybe I need to be a little more harsher and take a page out of your book and get them to see, because truly I'm speaking at, like, say, AMERICULT or these different beautiful festivals in beautiful parts of the world, and I'm thankful for it. I'm having a good time, but I stop and I look around and I see these people and I'm like, okay, there's people here, some of them are genuinely here to learn, they really care about the planet, but are they going to do anything different when they go home, or is this all just a big party for us to get together and share some ideas and feel good about it?
This isn't a social event for people like you and I.
No, not at all.
We really seriously want to see real-world change for the better regarding human freedom occur. And that takes real-world action by mass numbers of people, not a few people. There's a big psyop that I think has been put in place by the New Age community is only very small numbers of people are required to make big changes happen. I've never bought into that and believed it. Yes, small numbers of people are usually the most driven and can drive change, but the change has to happen in a large percentage of the population for it to really flip an overarching social dynamic to the other,
especially
to the other polarity.
The amount of control we have now.
That's right.
I mean, it's not like we're just trying to shake off one little, you know, like, oh, okay, we just got to stop them from doing this one action. No, we have this whole system with multiple attacks from multiple different ways that can't just be voted out, can't just be, you know,
it's all predicated upon a belief system.
Absolutely.
The belief system, as you talked about last night, and as I've been talking about, is the belief in authority. That's the ultimate religion that we have to break down and start to get people to stop believing in. You know, and that's a taller task than it seems because they're tied to it. They have a personal, emotional investment in it, and they have an identity invested in it. This is what identity politics means. It means that you actually make your identity, you know, about your political platform or party as an individual, as a human being. And that's a scary thought, to identify with a team, or as I would call it, a religion, and I would even call it something much stronger than that. I would call it a cult. And I think this is what we have to really start identifying government and political parties as. These are cults. They're dangerous to people who really want true freedom. extreme. It's not just a mindset. It's not just a religious mindset. It's a cult mindset.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think we have to stop euphemizing the language and just say it out in the open as what it is. You know, the belief in government is a cult.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think if we put it out there more for people like that, and we relate to how this is a dangerous religion, and it's just like other extremist religious beliefs.
Yeah.
I think people who understand that religious fundamentalism and extremity is not a good and conducive thing for harmony and humanity. So a lot of people do understand that in the political activism space, you know, but they need to see how their behavior is like a cult.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and they haven't made that connection. They haven't made that association yet, unfortunately. I like what you were talking about last night regarding how, you know, in your activism work, you tried to get people who are involved in purely political activism to see the spiritual aspects of what needs to change and go on in their mindset and in their spiritual lives, and they didn't want any part of that. And then you went to the New Age and spiritual communities, and you were trying to tell them about all the negative aspects of what's taking place in the whole political machinations of our world, and they didn't want to hear that, and they were saying, don't talk about the negative.
Don't manifest it. Yeah, no, it was this, I found myself going back and forth until, as I said last night, I sort of just, for about a year and a half, I accepted that was the reality,
right.
But it became increasingly hard because, as you know, like when you realize that these are two sides of the same coin,
yeah.
I had, you know, one of those sort of shifts. I was up for 3 days straight just researching, and like that phrase, the conscious resistance, came, and I was like, I can't, there's no need to separate this.
Perfect.
I can't pull it apart.
It says it all in one phrase, you know,
to me
it has to be consciousness, yet you have to resist all of these negative things and these negative polarities and you know, mind control techniques that are being employed against us, and that takes internal spiritual resistance. So it's a good combination of terms for, like, you know, a movement or you know, a project. Absolutely. And you know, this whole idea that they have totally split people into almost two camps, and never the twain shall meet. You know, the spiritualists aren't going to get into the whole, you know, control system aspects, and the people who are very reactive to the political machinations, they don't want to learn the spirituality aspects and the consciousness aspects. And these things have to be bridged.
Yeah.
We're never going to make headway unless we bridge those dynamics, and we get people to awaken spiritually, and then decide, I'm going to pull away from any support that I may have been giving this cult and this belief in authority, and then we'll see real world change start to happen.
Absolutely. So, well, I want to reflect on that as well. Again,
sure.
You know, you're totally right. It's a cult. I mean, there's really no other way to look at it. I did a video 2 years ago called "Voting is a Ritual Meant to Divide," and sort of saying this, and I know you talked about this before, that the thing about cults, they all have their sacraments, they all have their rituals.
That's right.
And the election period, the vote, is, of course, one of those biggest rituals that they have. And it's absolutely meant to divide people. And in the last election, 2016 election, the video I did was basically saying how, you know, you have this polarity of this extreme masculine kind of authority figure in Trump, and some people are like, oh, you know, he'll come and just stamp out our enemies. And then you had, you know, it's kind of difficult to associate Hillary with feminine, but she was playing that old grandma role.
Sure.
You know, she's the Abuelita here to kind of be all nice to the Hispanic community. So you had the feminine and the masculine, polar opposites, but also polar extremes politically, and just trying to tear people apart at the seams and take those different aspects and pick one, choose one, you know, and it's absolutely important because we're coming up to the midterms. We're, you know, 2 years away from the presidential election, but we'll be hearing about it before we know it, and it is just a way to keep people constantly indoctrinated, constantly opposing the other tribe. And I recently participated in a very mainstream video on a mainstream YouTube channel where it was voters versus non-voters. And of the voters there, each of them sort of expressed in their own way that they were content and thought it was a meaningful strategy to shame non-voters. Like, this is the other thing that they're being reinforced in the narrative, is shame them. I recently was at an event confronting John Kerry, and at that event, John Kerry and all his politicians were speaking, saying, you know, you tell your neighbors if you don't like what they're doing, why not shame them if they don't vote? And they talked about using some software where they could identify all the non-voters in a neighborhood and send their neighbors letters to say, hey, your neighbor didn't vote in this election, put some pressure on. I mean, so this is the way that they're so desperately scared that people will step away from the game and not play, that they have to keep the indoctrination on full blast, full steam ahead. And that has all the signs of what a cult needs to do. They don't want anybody to challenge the leader, to challenge the rituals, and challenge the sanctity of them. And anybody who does must be shamed and excommunicated.
Isolated, fighting with each other, and just completely repeat in a repetitious fashion all of the indoctrination that you want to pump into their brain. That's how cults have always done it. It's been the techniques of cults for thousands of years. And one of the most important aspects of the indoctrination techniques that they use is the reason that there are only two political parties is they're going to a very deeply seated psychological dynamic that exists in most people, and that is parental abandonment issues, or even just parental inadequacy issues. So we all have that to a certain extent in our lives, where, you know, probably very rarely do any of us have perfect parenting.
Absolutely.
Okay? And most of us have absent parenting in many cases, unfortunately, in the kind of culture of divorce and polarization between men and women in the genders that exists in our world today. So many people have parental abandonment issues of one kind or another, and that's why there's only two political parties. They can't have a third political party because there's no such thing as a third parent. You know, you have to have people with mommy issues trying to identify with the mommy aspect of government, which is the taking care of everybody from cradle to grave, the nanny state. Yeah. That's the Democratic Party in the United States. And then the people who want protection from cradle to grave from a strong father figure, that's the Republican Party. Those are the people with daddy issues, you know, and that's the right side of the political equation. And so they play these two dynamics off against each other, and most people don't understand anything about their internal psychological makeup and the shadow work that they need to do to work through different types of abandonment issues and different psychological distress that they have, or trauma that they have gone through. And they're not doing that shadow work. They're not doing that internal dynamic shadow work upon themselves to work on themselves. They haven't done any aspect of it in most cases. And so they're perfect targets for the type of very deep psychology that we're talking about that plays into these cult belief systems, namely parental abandonment issues, and that's the reason for the two polarized political parties. One represents mommy, one represents daddy. Absolutely. It's genius. Like you said, we're saying about the PSYOPs techniques, you know, if we are going to give the people who are doing these manipulations their proper due and not take them lightly and realize what we're really up against, they have a very advanced psychological strategy going for them that has worked perfectly over a period of thousands of years. They don't change their formula because it has worked upon the human population and unfortunately continues to work. We have to see these dynamics for what they are and clearly be able to break them down and pick them apart and explain them to others. And once we get that understanding in a more deep-seated way out there into the population, maybe people will start reclaiming some of their power when they start doing some of the psychological shadow work that needs to be done to start to steal their consciousness and their emotions against all these types of mind control techniques that are out there. But you have to give the enemy proper credit. That it's a genius strategy, and their strategy works because they know our psychology better than we know our psychology, very unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, to me, is why, you know, the importance of emphasizing critical thinking, you know, mindfulness, being aware of your own self, because as we were saying last night, otherwise you just become this empty vessel that anybody can fill with whatever they want, right? And that can be then manipulated to drive whichever direction you want to go. Right. And most people are doing that, as I was saying with activism last night. Most people are reactive.
That's right.
They're not proactive. They're not thinking ahead in terms of how can I take care of my family? How can I, you know, think about the future? How can, it's this culture that has told people to be so much in the present moment, but not in any sort of like spiritually enlightened way of, you know, be here now kind of meditation, reflection. It's more of like YOLO, you only live once, like go crazy, you know, don't think about tomorrow.
Right.
And that feeds into their inability to see past what's right in front of them. So they kill them, give them an example, be upset about this, be offended by this, run over here. You know,
what are we going to be upset about this week?
Exactly.
Go and try to politically change by, you know, holding signs out and going out and protesting, you know? And a lot of people fall into that. You know, I'll give you a brief anecdote about when I started doing this type of work, before I began actually. When I really started realizing that I had to do something and put something out there and get involved and be active, I tried to sit for a long time. I actually belabored over this for many months and didn't take any action. I said, I don't want to start taking action until, number one, I'm sure of what I'm talking about and have these dynamics accurate. And two, I want to do it in the best way possible. I don't want to do something that is going to be long-term ineffective, but I want to do something that's going to make the maximum impact. And when I thought about all the possible things that I could possibly get involved in doing, from any kind of political activism to any kind of work with volunteer groups, etc., it all ultimately came down to knowledge. For me, it came down to what is causing the problem at a fundamental causal factor level. And the answer came back overwhelmingly: ignorance. People do not know what is going on. They do not have the data. They are trying to act and behave from a lack of data, from a position where they're still lacking too much information, and think that they know and think that their behaviors are going to be balanced and are going to be effective based on the information that they have currently. And I recognize that the information that people have currently about the dynamics taking place in our world are woefully inadequate. They do not have enough information. They have not sorted through the information to make sense of it in a way that they could then act upon it. And so what I felt in my early days before I even started doing any of this would be the most effective thing to do is to help put out proper educational materials for people to get the big picture. Big picture thinking, big picture dynamics in the form of presentations, podcasts, etc. And I felt that that would be the most effective way because, again, the old saying goes, you could teach a man, you could help a man fish and it'll feed him for a day. But if you teach him to fish, then it'll feed him for, forever, for his life.
Okay, and we are back. I hope you enjoyed that. So, yeah, I started the 17-minute time code, and they covered, as I just said, these statements from Alex Jones and Mike Adams about martial law, going into the cult-like mindset. And I'm here to tell you, if you're starting to wake up to the real reality as things are, you are not alone. You are not alone. But we are taught here to feel like we are alone and got my little teapot here. That's right, free range. It's not always fun to live off the grid. Sometimes I'm a little bit bored, but I do it for a reason. And I'll tell you what, it's not for growing marijuana. Nothing wrong with growing marijuana, but it's not what brought me to Colorado. If you're in Colorado, say hello. I would like to see more conscious people find each other, and we're at different levels of waking up. And, not everybody vibes together, but there should be more community. There should be more of an attempt and to show people what it's like for people to get along and have even a conversation about real world events. Growing food is very important. It's not the only thing. Being able to grow food and have an off grid homestead, as well as incorporate other ideas and show what respectful relationships look like. I kind of wanted to end on a more positive note, right? Really, a recommendation that you find a spiritual practice. And I'm just going to zone in on that right now. Take a deep breath. And find a way to find a meditation practice that will work for you. It is on the individual. It is on the individual to program themselves. It is on the individual that is it is your responsibility to heal yourself from the damage done here. You can go to a head doctor and you'll find out what they'll say. Hell, listen to that interview with Richie Allen. He's interviewing a woman that was locked up for sharing her concerns about 5G technology in the UK. We are still in the day and age where they will lock a fool up, call someone a fool at the bare minimum if they're waking up to the conspiracy or if they're waking up to spirituality. Like their pain, their breakdown could literally be a breakthrough if they had the right life coach or if they were listening to the right piece of advice. And I'm here to tell you, I'm dedicated to trying to, I'm not perfect. I don't have my life all figured out, but I know that a lot of us are on the same mission. A lot of us feel lonely to a certain degree, which is normal and natural. It's how we deal with that and have the mindful solitude. But a lot of us have gone our own way in life. People like myself, I have a history that goes back years. And even if someone says that they agree with some of the concepts, they may not know what it's ever like in a million years to actually walk in my shoes and deal with actually being judged by society for being who we are and speaking our truth. You know, I don't come here day in, day in. I don't work for likes. You know, the YouTube AdSense is maybe a means to an end, but the greater idea was that our information is helping the world become a better place. And right now we're in some dark ages to where we have to work really hard to continue doing what we're doing because, as I said earlier, there seems to be negative loop, negative um, energy coming back for positive work done, or negative enforcement for good behavior in a world where negative behavior has the positive enforcement. And we can become very disillusioned by what is most important when we're punished by this world for being good, or when we face hardship. A little bit of encouragement to Mark Passio, because I have been there. And before I lived that year in my vehicle, I had 10 years on Access TV and I couldn't figure it out. Was there something wrong with what I did for 10 years? Staying out of the left right paradigm when Bush was in office and Obama was in office. And you'll notice people, men that are way older than I, that have joined YouTube that weren't involved as early as I was in the years just after 9/11. I got involved arguably very young, younger than most men. I'm still somewhat young-ish, yet technically the reality is I'll be 40 soon enough. So, check out the links down below, support if you can. And I'm going to be holding back less with some of the perceptions that I have about the future, but I have the personal discretion to know what should be on YouTube and what should be limited to outsidethebox.vhx.tv, because we are now in new waters and not everybody's on board with the understanding as to what's really going down. And I can't be here to try to heal the mind control in everybody. If some people are able to get where we're at really in the game and the geopolitical realities that are to follow, great. And the need to be spiritually aware and go beyond the illusions of separation politically and ethnically, great. But for the others that are still going to be in the toilet bowl, left right divide, that are trying to bring YouTubers down with them, I'm not down with that. I can't allow that. I got to stay outside the illusions of separation and stay outside of seeing one group more superior than other, in particular racially, and care for all groups and aim to continue to show people the left right paradigm and bring people together under a greater sense of spiritual unity amongst us. And that's the path that I'm here to play.